Well, that surpassed all expectations. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, and today we are sadly going to be talking about the finale of Loki, but I will say the season 1 finale of Loki. That's right guys, we're going to be talking about full spoilers for Loki episode 6 because holy cow, this was just a phenomenal ending to one of my favorite things Marvel has ever done. I'm going to have to reevaluate my entire ranking list. Last week I said that I was going to probably rank it around number 5 out of all the Marvel properties that have been made up until this point, and honestly, I might bump it up just a little bit more than that because I found this episode to wrap everything up so perfectly in terms of the character arcs of this season, but also leave it so open not only to a future season 2 of the show, but to the future of the MCU, having ramifications that were so much grander than I think anybody was really expecting out of the show. So the episode picks up and you get to see the Marvel Studios logo, but you get to hear little blurbs and little lines of dialogue that are iconic from all these several dozens of Marvel properties up until this point. You get to hear all these different things and you get to fly through the universe, all these galaxies and stars, and you zoom out into this like waving white timeline, this loop, this ring around this castle, and you get to see, of course, Loki and Sylvie walking up to this grand castle we saw that was teased in the last episode, and we get to see them essentially being very hesitant to break into this place. Sylvie says that she's been waiting her entire life for this moment, and Loki there to support her, and they get inside of there, and of course you get to see who's behind everything, and of course, like I predicted in my last video, it is, of course, Miss Minutes. But then we get to talk more with Miss Minutes, and we get to talk more with Loki and Sylvie, and this conversation goes on about how the one who remains is behind everything. This one who remains has created this timeline to keep peace, to stop a multiversal war, and this one who remains is behind everything. You get to see Loki and Sylvie talking back and forth with this thing, and Miss Minutes offering this chance for them to go back into the main sacred timeline to live out their lives. She says that Loki can go and rule Midgard and rule the 9 realms and sit on the throne of Asgard. She says that Sylvie can go on and live all the happy memories that she lost out on in her childhood. This beautiful reality that is just complete fiction to these characters, because as we have learned from these people throughout the entirety of the series, that they have worked so hard, they have been through so much to get to this point, especially with Sylvie growing up in the ends of 1,000 worlds and all these different things that she had gone through to get to this point, to find out who was the person behind the curtain. And she was not going to stop here for a little bargain, for a little glimpse of a happy life, because that's not who she is. That's not going to be her. That's going to be someone else. That's not going to be her with her experiences. To her, all these things that she has gone through has led up to this exact moment, which is very important when it comes to the ending of this episode. So Miss Minutes kind of leads them through this castle and to this doorway. Miss Minutes goes away, and we get to see this door open. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about how Mobius has gone back to the TVA to essentially burn it to the ground. And you get to see Mobius confront RENSLAYER, which is a very wonderfully written scene, because at the beginning of the show, they seemed like they were very close, that there was something between them, some friendship between them that was very strong and very tight. And you get to see throughout this entire show that friendship and that bond that they have kind of drift apart until last episode, when Mobius found out the truth about the TVA and he feels betrayed by them. And what's brilliant about this scene is, and what's brilliant about the show and the writing of the show, especially with this episode, is how everybody in this episode and their philosophies and their beliefs of what's going on is completely right in their own perspective. Mobius believes that the TVA, and especially RAVONNA RENSLAYER, betrayed him. He trusted her, he trusted the ideals that the TVA had, and to find out that all of it was a lie and that he was taken from his life on the sacred timeline, that hurt him, and that is very important to him, and he misses that very, very much. And to RENSLAYER, her favorite analyst, being Mobius, betrayed her by going against the TVA, by thinking of all these things that he's been doing. And honestly, that is also completely fair, because he's trying to he's trying to burn down the TVA, this organization that they had spent eons, she said, believing in, and all that for a couple of Lokis. And you completely believe both sides of this argument, and you get to see the things that he's doing to tear down the TVA. He's having, B-15 show different other TVA agents the the history behind the pen that Renslayer has, and that pen was from her school that she ran on the Sacred Timeline. And I knew there was something up with that pen. I thought maybe it was like a different version of Mobius, and she's deleted Mobius several times and always gone back to get Mobius, to have different versions of him because she was attached to this person. But no, it was her school. She was a teacher in her timeline before she was yanked out of her life and plopped into the sacred, or into the TVA outside of the Sacred Timeline. And so you get some history behind that, and you get to see essentially Mobius and B-15 telling all the TVA agents that they are variants, and kind of turning them against the ideology of the TVA, which was very interesting to see. But of course, what everybody has come here to talk about is the big reveal. The door opens, Loki and Sylvie are ready to meet who this man who has remained is, and of course, it is not only the big bad of hopefully the entirety of this new phase of MCU movies, but it is also a phenomenal actor in Jonathan Majors as Kang the Conqueror, but not quite Kang the Conqueror just yet. His name isn't really dropped in this episode. He's just kind of the one who remains. He's Jonathan Majors. He's playing this role, and he was phenomenal in this episode. I can't express how much I loved his mannerisms, how I loved his performance in this episode. This omniscient being, essentially, even though he's just a man, he's simply just a guy, and that is kind of shocking to Sylvie and Loki because they expected so much more out of who this person is. But as you reveal more things about him, and you reveal about what he's done to create this, this sacred timeline, and all these things that he had to sacrifice, and all these timelines he had to destroy, and finding out more about his character, you get to see the true evil intent behind this character and how scary he really was in just his human form. And throughout this entire sequence, both Loki and Sylvie are ready with their daggers, ready to attack this guy, this guy who seems harmless, and Sylvie even does at one point. And of course, he has one of those temp pads, and he just zips around the elevator and zips around, and she can't quite get him because he apparently knows how all of this is going to go. He has seen all of this because it was all written out for him. This was all according to his plan. Everything that they had done, all the scheming, all the things that happened on Lamentus 1, all these different things that happened throughout this entire show was according to his plan, to his schemes. And you get to find out all of this, and you see Loki kind of listening to what he's saying, and you see Sylvie kind of denying what he's saying. You get to see, just through their performances of listening to all this exposition that he's giving, essentially, which was very, very good, because you want to learn about all this stuff, and you want to learn about these things, and Jonathan Majors does a great job of telling and speaking all this exposition that it just really worked. You get to find out a lot about how he got to this point. He said that he grew up in the 31st century, far into the future of what we've seen already in the current MCU. And so he grew up in that time period, and he was a scientist, and that's the Reed Richards connection right there, because he is a great several times great descendant of Reed Richards from the Fantastic Four, which is a really cool connection. I'm excited to see how that goes in the future. But you get to see how he was a scientist, and he discovered that there were other realities stacked on top of the reality that he lived in. And in those realities, there was other variants of him that also discovered that there were other realities that were stacked on top of each other. And there was some sort of peace between all of them. They shared technologies, they shared knowledge, they shared things to make each other universe the best that they possibly could be, until you have universes where there were some not so kind versions of this character, of Kang, and all these different evil versions of him kind of started this universe, or this multiversal war, essentially, between all the different multiverses in the madness of all this stuff. And it is just all very, very exciting to see how he just kind of weeded it down to one timeline, and this is the sacred timeline. He essentially conquered the universe, which I was talking to my brother about this the other day, of how I wanted the villain in this show to be Kang, because for one, that would just be a mind-blowing thing, and I thought maybe we would just get a cameo of this. I thought maybe it would be a Loki behind everything. That was the general consensus of what people thought was going to happen, because we didn't have high hopes that Kang would be in it, at least in this large capacity, but that's exactly what we got. And what I was telling my brother was to face a villain who had already conquered the universe. Because Thanos, yes, he succeeded his goal and he snapped half existence away, but he wasn't the ruler of the universe. He wasn't the ruler of all time and space, and that's essentially what this version of Kang had done, creating the sacred timeline. And so throughout all this exposition, all these things that he's explaining of how he created this essentially utopia for him to have the nicest possible universe that has the least amount of chaos in it was a very fascinating idea, because you're facing now against a villain that is very much a threat, because you see that he has already accomplished this. He says he'll accomplish it again, and he says that he had lost it before, and that he'll just keep on conquering the world again, or the universe again, because that's what he does. And that was very terrifying. And you get to the point in the episode where they reach the end of the timeline. They reach the end of time, and Jonathan Majors says that he no longer can see what's going to happen, and now the fates of the multiverse is in the hands of Loki and Sylvie. And this is where I was just in my seats, because I forgot to mention this. I watched this in theaters because I work at a movie theater, and of course I was going to screen this at my movie theater. So I'm watching this in theaters. I'm sitting there in my seats, reclined out, and just on the edge of my seats, tension filled, and I'm saying to myself, do it. Kill this guy. I know Sylvie wants to do it. She really, she's trained her entire life for this. Like I said earlier in this video, she's trained everything that she has done in her life has been to get to this point, to destroy whoever was at the end, whoever created the TVA, the person who ripped her away from her life. She won't take any bargain of going back and having a happy life, because that won't be her. That'll be a different version of her, and so she won't have any of that. And so I was just pleading to the show, like, please, just kill this guy, because we know he's going to come back. There's going to be other variants of him, and how great would it be if we finally got something that would destroy the multiverse that we've been building up to for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. We all thought it was going to be WandaVision. It was looking like it was going to be WandaVision until it wasn't, but now we finally get our chance, and before that happens, we get a fight between Loki and Sylvie, which I will again beg the question, because the people I watched at the screening with at the theater, a lot of them were thinking that the relationship, that's romance between Loki and Sylvie, is weird, and I still don't know if I think it's weird. I think it's I think the relationship that they formed throughout the last 3 episodes were really, really heartwarming, and I really like this relationship that they have, this weird sort of thing that they have going on, and I don't know if it's weird still. Let me know. But to see these two characters fight was heartbreaking because of the journey that they had been on, and you saw in their faces throughout their performances that they just didn't jive the same with what Jonathan Majors was saying. All these things that he was saying, Sylvie not believing any of it to be true, and Loki buying into that possibly it could be true, and them fighting against each other, hoping that one of them can convince the other to change their minds. And some brilliant writing once again is when they say that Sylvie doesn't know how to trust, and that Loki can never be trusted. And you basically have a version from the Dark Knight of the unstoppable force versus the immovable object, and you have these Lokis fighting against each other, and their philosophies of what they believe to be true with Jonathan Majors and what he has said throughout this episode, all coming to a head in this incredible fight, the best hand-to-hand combat fight in the entire series, by the way. This was a phenomenal fight, showcasing their powers and abilities in a really fun and intense way. And because you just got the needle drop of them saying that, the timeline is up to them. Jonathan Majors doesn't know what's going to happen. He's just sitting in his chair, like, all excited, like as if he's us, the audience, watching this crazy fight going down, and it was so just perfect. And then you get to the point where Sylvie gets her hands on the tempad, and they kiss. They actually have a kiss in this episode, which, again, I beg the question, is that weird? I don't know. I thought it was a lovely moment. But, of course, Sylvie has the tempad and pushes him through one of the time gates and shuts it, and he is stuck back in the TVA. And then it's just Sylvie and Kang in the room, and without hesitation, Sylvie knocks away the desk and straight up kills Kang at the end of this episode. And he just says, as in his last final breaths, in his dying words, he says, "I'll see you soon." And my God, the excitement. But that's not the ending just yet. Back at the TVA, you get to see MOBIUS and B-15 looking at the timelines branch out. RENSLAYER has Flea to go who knows where. Maybe she's going, one of my friends said that maybe she's going to find a version of Kang. Maybe she's going to a timeline where she knows Kang, because in the comics they do have some sort of romantic relationship between each other. So that could very much be a possibility. Since we are getting season 2, we don't have quite a finale for the relationship between MOBIUS and RENSLAYER, and of course Loki and Sylvie, because all of that is left in essentially turmoil. But you get to see all these branching realities breaking out, and you get to see Loki running, and he has an idea. He's going to find MOBIUS and to find B-15, and he goes up to them and says that they had killed the person behind the curtain. They killed the one who remained, and they destroyed the sacred timeline. They've created all these, the multiverse of madness, essentially. And the heartbreaking thing happened where MOBIUS and B-15 asks him what agent he was, what his number was, who he was, because that is not his universe. He was knocked by Sylvie into one of the branching realities that he had never met Mobius, and Mobius had never met Loki, and he just doesn't know who they are, and it's just completely shocking that he's just in a different universe now. He can't even help the main timeline that will be in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness or stuff like that. Maybe Loki will pop up in that show. I know that Scarlet Witch is going to be in that show, and you're going to have Doctor Strange, and you're going to have all these things, and maybe you're possibly going to get Kang in that movie as well. I'm hoping you get some appearance of Kang, maybe even in just an after credit scene, even though he is supposed to debut in film in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which we'll get to that in a second. But all these things have built up from this show, and the whole timestamp, the after credit scene, is no after credit scene, but it is a stamp on Loki's file saying that Loki will return in season 2, which gets me so excited because none of the shows that we've gotten so far have set themselves up for season 2. They all wrapped up pretty nicely. WandaVision went through her arc and her grief, and you had Falcon and the Winter Soldier, them getting through their things and becoming the new Captain America, with Falcon and Bucky coming to terms with what he's done in the past as the Winter Soldier, and them building their bond that had been, formed between Winter Soldier and Captain America before with Steve Rogers, and you had all that tie up in a nice little bow. Loki blew the lid off the universe. So I am sure I missed something in this video, talking about all the things, all the crazy world-bending things, universe-bending things that happened in this episode of Loki. My overall thoughts on the series is that I absolutely love Loki. It's definitely in my top 5 of everything that Marvel has ever done. The writer of Rick and Morty did this show. I love the score of this show. I honestly think it's my favorite MCU score to date. So Kate Herron, Michael Waldron, and Natalie Holt, you guys are amazing. I hope all 3 of you guys return to write, direct, and score Loki season 2. I cannot wait. I believe the writer of this is also going to write Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which gets me so excited because that movie is going to be bonkers insane, and you're going to deal with the ramifications of that first in probably Spider-Man No Way Home. I really hope we get to see all the Tobey Maguires and Andrew Garfields and all these different versions of Spider-Man in the multiverse. I really hope we're going to get that in No Way Home. I really hope we're going to get things like, in Doctor Strange, have that movie happen, and in Quantumania, having an Ant-Man movie be grander scale than the Ant-Man movies that we've had so far, because both those Ant-Man movies have felt extremely inconsequential in their own right, because Ant-Man came out right after, I believe, it was Age of Ultron. Ant-Man came out right after that, and it was just kind of its own little thing, and it kind of tied in, and it kind of set up for Civil War, and Ant-Man was in Civil War and had a bigger role in that. And then you had Ant-Man and the Wasp, which came out right after Avengers Infinity War, and again, it was just kind of a little side story until it had connections at the end of that. And yes, it did set up the time travel for Avengers Endgame, but besides that, it felt like a smaller scale movie. And now you have Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which is coming out hopefully soon, and you get to see that they're going to be dealing head on with Kang the Conqueror. We're probably going to get hopefully we're going to get a lot of Fantastic Four references in that, and hopefully we're going to set up more of him being the big bad of this series going forward. Another thing that I want to mention, because I looked up briefly what Kang was in the comics and his technology-based powers, and you get to see that there's a version of Kang in the comics that was Iron Lad, who is a part of the Young Avengers, who essentially brought together the Young Avengers. And as we've seen from all the Disney Plus shows and all these things coming out, them setting up all the Young Avengers. You have Wiccan and Speed from WandaVision. You have Patriots from Falcon Winter Soldier. You have Miss Marvel coming out soon. You have all these different characters. I think America Chavez, I think, is also a character in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And then you have, Iron Lad possibly. You have Kate Bishop from Hawkeye. You have all these different characters that are probably going to form the Young Avengers. And that's probably going to be the next Avengers movie we get. It's probably going to be Young Avengers. And you have Iron Lad going against essentially a version of himself that he's trying not to become. And so that sounds really, really cool. There are so many possibilities for the future of the MCU. I might have a video talking to my brother about all these things, so subscribe to the channel to hopefully see that video. I loved talking about Loki with all of you guys on my channel. I loved this show. I loved the finale. I want to hear all your thoughts on this, and you guys are probably more knowledgeable about the comics than I am, so comment down below your thoughts on this episode of Loki. What do you think? What is the future of the MCU? What are your hopes and dreams, and what did you think of this show? Let me know. Rank all the Marvel movies while you're at it too, along with all the shows spliced in there. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you all in my next video.